Well, good morning. It's Monday, May the 10th, 2021. I trust that your Mother's Day was a celebration of honor and thanksgiving, that you, as a child to your mother, rose up and called her blessed. We return to our study in the book of Ecclesiastes, in particular, chapter 3. And we come to the first part of verse 4, a time to weep and a time to dance. Excuse me, I went too far on the PowerPoint slide here. Here we go. A time to weep and a time to laugh. And in the same verse, tomorrow we'll look at a time to mourn and a time to dance. It seems like these are two parallel phrases trying to indicate the same thing, but I believe that they have different nuances or a different emphasis. So let's just talk about a time to weep and a time to laugh. Now let's remember who is writing this book. This is King Solomon, who is a Jew, who is the ruler over Israel. His father united the kingdom, and he was appointed heir to succeed David to the throne. He is also the wisest man that ever lived because God endowed him with wisdom for him to rule the people. That was his request when God said, "Ask whatever you will, and I will give it to you." And this was demonstrated twice with the two prostitutes who had a child each, and one rolled over on her child and tried to claim that the other child was hers, and this is where you divide the baby in half, as well as the Queen of Sheba visiting Solomon and proclaiming that he was a very wise man. And so this Jewish leader is writing about a season to weep and a season to laugh. Now, the Hebrew word for weep means to grieve. There's a season to grieve. In Jewish culture, when there was something heartbreaking, they were very emotive in their expression. And sometimes the word bewail is used in the context. I can remember witnessing this of a Russian couple in my first church whose husband had died, and I did the service, and she typified a Eastern expression of mourning. I mean, she was wailing and crying uncontrollably, clinging to her husband in the casket. The word also means an unbearable burden, a very heavy burden that is being carried, one that would bend a person over emotionally and perhaps mentally. And another way it can be used is of a penitent prayer, a person repenting of their sin and overcome with great weeping for what they had done. Now, in Psalm 137, this word is used as the history of Israel is recorded about their exile underneath King Nebuchadnezzar. Psalm 137, verse 1 says this: "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion." And so they are weeping over their sin. They are weeping over all the goodness of God that they rejected and turned to idols instead. There's a season for such deep, deep sorrow and weeping. But here I want to focus in on the word season. There's a time for this. There is a time for this. God is not denying us our sorrow, our hurts, our pains, our expressions to weep. Some people are stoic, other people, as I mentioned, are emotive in expressing the hurts and the pains in their life. But there should be a season for this. There should be a season for this. I'm going to cautiously make this statement. Many times people celebrate the homegoing of a loved one, and there is great sorrow that almost leads to immobilization and depression. I think that remembrance should be turned to joy. That remembrance should be one of thanksgiving for the impact the loved one made. So there's a sorrow, there is a weeping, there is a burden, there is a season for that, there is a time for that. You think of people in the Bible who died. When Saul died, David set a time aside for the nation of Israel to weep over Saul, his archenemy, but he set a time to weep, a time to honor the man who persecuted him, but still was ruler of the nation of Israel. And then there's a time to laugh. There's a time to celebrate. There's a time of joy that we should experience. In Romans chapter 12, it says there's that we should weep with those who weep, and we should mourn or sorrow with those who sorrow. So even in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul recognizes this, and the Spirit of God incorporates it into the Scriptures. In Psalm 126, verse 2, it says, "Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with joyful shouting. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them." So there's a season to laugh. It is inappropriate to go ahead and be lighthearted at a serious event that has taken place. That is mockery. And there is a season which is appropriate to express our sorrow and our hurt. After the temple was built, the people who helped Ezra rebuild the temple, it is recorded in scriptures that they were very sad, that they wept, and the scriptures gives us a commentary that the reason that they wept is because it was not up to the standard of the glory of the temple that Solomon had built in earlier generations. And Ezra chastises them. This is a time to celebrate. This is a time to be joyful, not to be mourning. So there are individual applications here that each of us should look at. These are permissible. God has incorporated them into the scriptures for us to learn. There's a season, there's a place for weeping, either over our sin, presently, I believe, over our national rebellion against God. but there's a season to laugh. There's a season to rejoice. There's a season to recognize the hand of God and rejoice in that. Don't compare it to what God did earlier in our life experiences, because God is not confined or should not be assigned to you have to operate a certain way. Tomorrow we'll take a look at a time to mourn and a time to dance. I trust that you have a good